The shuttle's silence was absolute, as if space itself held its breath. Systems flickered under manual override, AI had refused to approach. No maps recognized this place. No broadcasts dared echo here. Only that signal, the rogue, pulsing echo of something too structured to be natural, too ancient to be human, had lured us to the dark side of a forgotten moon orbiting no known star. I volunteered not for glory, but because curiosity had long since replaced my survival instinct. As we descended, magnetic sheaths clawed at the hull, making the bones of the ship creak like an old man's whisper. Beneath that layer of interference, the fog parted like a reluctant curtain, revealing the structure. It wasn't a building. It wasn't even architecture by human standards. It looked like petrified geometry, shapes that had never evolved in our universe, angles that eyes could observe but brains refused to understand. They didn't build upwards or outwards. They grew through dimensions. Towers looped into themselves. Entrances appeared only when not looked at. And at the center, a spire throbbed, alive. The crew didn't speak. Mouths opened, but no words came. Even our thoughts seemed slower, fogged by an unseen dampening. I docked manually, scraping the side panel against an alien ridge that hadn't been there a second before. The airlock refused to match pressure. I didn't wait. I suited up and went in through the auxiliary crawl tunnel. They didn't follow. I knew they wouldn't. Once inside, gravity fluctuated in pulses like a dying heartbeat. The walls pulsed with unfamiliar rhythms, responding not to motion, but intention. My helmet HUD kept flickering into languages not in any database, then morphing into memories. My mother's voice. My first fall. A war I never fought. It knew me. The base knew me. Not just me, us. Humanity. It had studied the broadcasts, the probes, the faint stardust trails we left behind. And now it wanted to speak. Not through sound. Not through language. Through resonance. One step deeper, and I saw it, a chamber made of shifting crystal and void, reflecting my image but subtly, wrong. Older. Tired. Eyes filled with regret. It spoke by becoming my fears. It showed me things Earth didn't yet understand were coming. And worst of all, it offered something in return. Knowledge, yes. Power, of course. But also, a choice. One that humanity might never be ready to make. And I, a lone, unwanted, forgotten volunteer, was now its ambassador. I stepped closer to the sphere, though my instinct screamed retreat. It hovered above a dais of liquid geometry, shapes that stretched then collapsed into themselves like thoughts forming and then instantly forgetting. The sphere didn't emit light. It extracted it. The shadows it cast moved independently, slithering along the walls like echoes detached from origin. My breath fogged the helmet, even though the temperature read steady. My heartbeat syncopated, slow one moment, racing the next. This wasn't just a place. It was a mechanism, a mind, a trap disguised as a revelation. I reached out, fingertips inches away, and the sphere responded, not with touch, but understanding. In an instant, I was elsewhere. Earth, but not as I knew it. Cities choked in vines and fog. Monuments shattered, not by war, but by apathy. Humanity fractured, not because of enemies, but because we stopped listening. Climate, politics, survival, all drowned in white noise. And then the stars called us. Not in hope, but escape. This vision, this simulation, it wasn't prophecy. It was a record. A warning encoded in mimicry. And then, deeper still, I saw how they, the ones who built this base, faced their own collapse. Not from war. Not from hunger. From understanding too much, too fast. Their biology wasn't evolved for omniscience. Their consciousness fractured into hyper-awareness. They became lost in abstraction. Their greatest minds couldn't distinguish memory from math, fear from formula. They built this base as a vault, an ark not of species, but of thought. They preserved what remained of themselves in constructs like this sphere, part interface, part soul. And now it reached into me, seeking a bridge. My eyes watered. My ears rang with music I couldn't unhear. The chamber darkened, but inside my skull it brightened. It showed me what it needed. A translator. Not of language, but of limits. Someone to filter what it was through what we could survive. It couldn't speak to Earth directly, it would shatter us. But through me, it could drip-feed echoes. It offered a seed of technology, harmless, small, insignificant on the surface. But embedded within was the blueprint to rewire energy, reshape biology, and twist gravity into language. A gift, it said. A beginning. My knees buckled. Blood leaked from my nose. The knowledge bled into my neurons like static carved into silk. My HUD blinked warnings, then died. I fell forward, and the sphere caught me, not physically, but with presence. I was being rewritten, not in body, but in purpose. And when I woke, hours, years, or centuries later, I was still me. But different. The sphere had shared, and now it waited. When I came to, the chamber was gone, or maybe I had passed through it without realizing. There were no doors in this place, only transitions. I drifted now in a corridor absent of gravity, where walls flowed like silk under a slow tide. Every surface displayed constellations I didn't recognize, some were moving backward, collapsing inward, forming spirals that twisted logic. They weren't stars, at least not in the sense we understood. They were coordinates in thought, references in a language made of dimension and causality. As I drifted, the suit adjusted autonomously, stabilizing my rotation, but it couldn't filter what I was seeing. I wasn't just surrounded by light, I was surrounded by possibility. With every meter I floated, the constellations changed, and I felt them change me. Memories surfaced, my childhood, the first time I saw Earth from orbit, the screams of my brother as the re-entry fire claimed his pod. But they weren't playing back normally. They folded into new sequences, suggesting choices I never made, timelines that never existed. I watched myself take different paths, scientist instead of explorer, coward instead of volunteer. It wasn't madness. It was interface. The base was reading me the way one reads a waveform, sampling probabilities, stitching them into relevance. I understood, I wasn't navigating a hall. I was being sorted. Categorized. Labeled. Not for harm, not for containment, but for fit. This place was trying to determine if I could carry what it needed to deliver. Something bigger than code, more dangerous than intent. Knowledge that couldn't be written because it rewrote the writer. I reached a bend, not physical, but experiential. It wasn't a left turn. It was a shift in my own awareness. Suddenly, sound returned. Not through the ears, but directly inside thought. A voice, not alien, not mechanical. My own, yet deeper. A version of me that understood. You are now in the axis, it said. This is where the others chose exile over extinction. And I saw them, not their forms, but their resonance. Once brilliant, now fractured. They had built too far, too fast, consumed ideas that folded space and unzipped time. Their minds melted under the weight of unlimited comprehension. The base was their last coherence, a cry for help embedded in an arc of alien logic. And now they needed me, not as a savior, not even as a messenger. But as a limiter. A failsafe. The knowledge had to be contained in something fragile, something mortal. And I was the ideal fracture point. As I floated onward, the stars on the wall Scene 4, visual. Within a darkened chamber, a suspended biomechanical structure pulses with rhythms mimicking a human heartbeat. The deeper I moved into the base, the less it resembled any known architecture, organic and artificial boundaries blurred, and I found myself inside a chamber that breathed. Not metaphorically, it genuinely inhaled and exhaled in slow, planetary rhythms, each contraction pulling me closer to a massive structure suspended by glistening filaments. The construct resembled no machine, yet it pulsed with clear biomechanical intent. Its core emitted soft thuds, measured, deliberate. A heartbeat. And not just any pattern. Mine. The base had scanned me, mapped my physiology, and was now mirroring the very cadence of my blood's motion. Not to intimidate. Not to mimic. But to synchronize. The chamber didn't merely house knowledge, it was a converter, adapting infinite alien logic into human survivable fragments. The construct hovered in midair, supported by magnetic currents too precise to be accidental. And then it began to unfold. Not physically, but dimensionally. Like a flower blooming across timelines, it exposed glimpses of future technologies, each one flashing like a memory I hadn't earned yet. Quantum-rooted implants. Gravity-sculpted propulsion. Biocoding that allowed for emotion to be transmitted across species. Each glimpse lasted less than a breath, and yet the afterimage of each remained imprinted behind my eyes. And then the pain began, not physical, but cognitive. My brain screamed with pressure. The difference between comprehension and madness is only the width of a synapse, and this chamber was pressurizing all of mine. The construct pulsed faster, as if testing my limits. It fed me sequences, equations encoded in visual metaphors, algorithms disguised as memories, ethics folded into patterns of color and heat. One pattern stopped me cold. It wasn't knowledge. It was a warning. A moment where this same gift had been offered before, not to humans, but to another civilization. What followed was annihilation, not from external destruction, but internal desynchronization. Their world imploded under the paradox of knowing more than their biology could regulate. The base had learned from that mistake. Now, it didn't just give, it filtered. Me. I was its filter. A living capacitor, storing and translating ideas across time and species. I fell to my knees as the chamber stabilized. The structure stopped pulsing. It had completed phase 1. I hadn't died. That was its test. And now, embedded deep within my neurochemistry, were fragments of technologies Earth had never imagined, and wouldn't survive without. The construct folded back into silence. But I could feel it now. Not inside me. As me. The change had begun. Met a new pattern. A map. One destination, Earth. When I emerged from the internal convergence chamber, I wasn't the same person who had entered. Not metaphorically, not a poetic change of heart. I mean fundamentally, at the most molecularly structured level of identity, I had been rewritten. The memories were still mine, but their weight had shifted. My heartbeat was subtly attuned to rhythms I hadn't evolved to sense before. My eyes responded to wavelengths that didn't exist in any known physics. My thoughts carried a resonance that echoed inside the alien base's walls as if I were now part of its circuitry. And yet, the moment I stepped beyond its inner threshold, the base grew still, as if it were pausing to observe how its tool, me, would now carry what had been encoded. My comms flared to life, distorted at first, but there. The crew's voices, frantic, horrified, disbelieving. I hadn't been gone for hours. I hadn't even been missing for days. I had been inside the base for 43 standard days. And to them, I had vanished into a structure that rejected all scans, all logic, all attempts at breach. They'd remained in orbit, waiting, scared, debating whether to abandon ship or risk rescue. But no one ever crossed the boundary fog. No one dared to step where I had gone. I responded calmly, but something in my voice made them quiet. It wasn't just shock. It was instinct. Something inside them recognized something inside me that didn't quite match anymore. I told them to prepare the shuttle. We were leaving. But in truth, I wasn't returning as a survivor. I was returning as a carrier. The data embedded inside me couldn't be offloaded or uploaded. It had to grow. It had to mature inside the chaos of human civilization, wrapped in contradiction and driven by fear, hope, and ignorance. The base had trusted me with a seed, and Earth would be the soil. The pilot didn't ask questions when I docked. He looked into my face and saw uncertainty. Maybe he mistook it for trauma. Maybe he knew better. As we disengaged from orbit, I glanced back at the base. It shimmered, not with light, but with intention. Like it had shifted slightly in dimension, folding just enough to vanish from instruments again. It didn't want to be found twice. The gift was not a repetition. It was a risk, a one-time gamble on one fractured human and the species he represented. As the moon fell behind us, I felt it, the pulse inside my skull, faint, constant. The knowledge wasn't finished. It was just dormant, waiting for the moment when the earth itself would cry out loud enough to awaken it. That cry was coming. I could feel it. In politics. In oceans. In space. And when it came, the thing inside me would bloom. Not a weapon. Not salvation. Something worse. Something true. The return to Earth wasn't a celebration. It was containment. Our re-entry pod was immediately flagged by orbital surveillance. The automated systems had picked up radiation signatures not native to the solar system. They weren't dangerous, yet. But they weren't explainable either. Before we touched down, a global quarantine protocol was triggered. We weren't heroes. We were anomalies. A dozen black drones tailed us through upper orbit, scanning every micron of our hull for signs of biohazard, AI corruption, or extraterrestrial contamination. But they weren't scanning me. They didn't know to. The change was internal, cellular, neural, dimensional. I was carrying an intelligence that understood how to hide. We landed in a desolate complex off the African coast, repurposed decades ago for deep space recovery. Every wall dripped sterilization foam. Every light was ultraviolet. They stripped me, scanned me, interrogated me. Questions came in waves, each more aggressive, more desperate. I gave them nothing. Not because I refused, because I couldn't. The data wasn't stored in memory. It was encoded in experience. Trying to speak of it was like trying to explain color to a creature born blind. And worse, something inside me resisted. When I tried to talk, my mind fractured into spirals of contradiction, making speech impossible. The base hadn't just given me knowledge, it had sealed it under condition. A lock. And Earth hadn't earned the key. Not yet. Days passed. Scientists, military strategists, even philosophers were flown in. They poked, measured, demanded. But eventually, they saw it. I wasn't hostile. I wasn't unstable. But I was undeniably different. Not enhanced. Not augmented. Shifted. I saw probabilities like shadows, heard emotion like frequency. I understood silence better than words. They stopped asking questions and started watching instead. That's when I noticed her, a doctor who didn't belong. She spoke rarely, took no notes, asked no questions. She just observed. When we were finally alone, she whispered without looking at me, "You're not the first." Her tone was steady, her face unreadable. I froze. She continued. In 2094, a probe was launched toward Tau Ceti. It returned, years early. Empty. Except for a journal, partially burned. It contained blueprints. Equations. Ethics we still don't understand. That's when the quarantines began. We thought they'd come. But it wasn't them. It was us, those who came back changed. She looked up at me. They called you the Axis, didn't they? My breath caught. She smiled faintly. I'm not here to contain you. I'm here to see if you break. Because if you do, we won't survive what comes next. And just like that, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't here to bring Earth hope. I was here to see if Earth could survive the truth it already feared. The facility was buried beneath kilometers of reinforced rock, a structure forgotten even by those who funded its construction. It wasn't a bunker, it was a buffer. A null zone designed to isolate anything that couldn't be categorized. And now, I stood before the vault's monolithic door, flanked by analysts, soldiers, and a silence that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. They thought the answers were inside. But they were wrong. The answers were inside me. And the vault, it was built to fail. I wasn't here to contain what I carried. I was here to test its release. The base hadn't chosen Earth at random. It had followed echoes, ancient harmonics from our core, patterns too precise to be coincidence. Our planet hummed a song it didn't know it was singing. The base heard it. And I was the bridge. The woman, the doctor, stood beside me again, her expression unreadable. "It's time," she whispered. "No alarms, no countdown. Just pressure. The kind of pressure that warps time, stretches thought." I placed my hand on the access panel. The vault didn't scan identity. It scanned entropy. My entropy. The pattern of disorder written into my very molecules. The lock accepted the gift. The door opened. Inside was not darkness. Not light. Not technology. A mirror. But not one that reflected surface, one that reflected potential. The chamber began to hum, and I felt my chest vibrate in response. Not pain. Not fear. Recognition. My veins pulsed with the rhythm of something awakening beneath Earth's mantle. Across continents, subtle tremors began, not seismic, not destructive. Resonant. Frequencies long dormant beneath oceans, ice caps, deserts. Ancient responses to a call that had finally returned. I stepped into the mirror. The air solidified, then softened. I wasn't moving through space, I was moving through acceptance. The base hadn't just studied us. It had prepared us, planted seeds millennia ago. Tiny anomalies in evolution, strange leaps in cognition, moments when human history jumped without visible cause. We called them miracles. They were messages. The vault was the final node. When I entered, I didn't disappear. I amplified. Across the globe, dreamers convulsed in sleep. Children drew symbols they'd never seen. Machines whispered code no one programmed. And the Earth answered, not in words, but in alignment. The alien knowledge inside me was never meant to dominate. It was meant to merge. Earth was not just a recipient. It was a participant. The base had been waiting, not for salvation, but synchronization. As the frequencies merged, the doctor fell to her knees, weeping. Not in fear. In awe. Behind me, systems shut down. Screens shattered from harmonic overload. The vault sealed itself. And the last thing I heard before my atoms scattered into signal was not a farewell. It was a beginning. One sentence, clear and final, in a voice that sounded both alien and human. Now you are not alone. The facility was buried beneath kilometers of reinforced rock, a structure forgotten even by those who funded its construction. It wasn't a bunker, it was a buffer. A null zone designed to isolate anything that couldn't be categorized. And now, I stood before the vault's monolithic door, flanked by analysts, soldiers, and a silence that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. They thought the answers were inside. But they were wrong. The answers were inside me. And the vault, it was built to fail. I wasn't here to contain what I carried. I was here to test its release. The base hadn't chosen Earth at random. It had followed echoes, ancient harmonics from our core, patterns too precise to be coincidence. Our planet hummed a song it didn't know it was singing. The base heard it. And I was the bridge. The woman, the doctor, stood beside me again, her expression unreadable. "It's time," she whispered. "No alarms, no countdown. Just pressure. The kind of pressure that warps time, stretches thought." I placed my hand on the access panel. The vault didn't scan identity. It scanned entropy. My entropy. The pattern of disorder written into my very molecules. The lock accepted the gift. the door opened. Inside was not darkness. Not light. Not technology. A mirror. But not one that reflected surface, one that reflected potential. The chamber began to hum, and I felt my chest vibrate in response. Not pain. Not fear. Recognition. My veins pulsed with the rhythm of something awakening beneath Earth's mantle. Across continents, subtle tremors began, not seismic, not destructive. Resonant. Frequencies long dormant beneath oceans, ice caps, deserts. Ancient responses to a call that had finally returned. I stepped into the mirror. The air solidified, then softened. I wasn't moving through space, I was moving through acceptance. The base hadn't just studied us. It had prepared us, planted seeds millennia ago. Tiny anomalies in evolution, strange leaps in cognition, moments when human history jumped without visible cause. We called them miracles. They were messages. The vault was the final node. When I entered, I didn't disappear. I amplified. Across the globe, dreamers convulsed in sleep. Children drew symbols they'd never seen. Machines whispered code no one programmed. And the earth answered, not in words, but in alignment. The alien knowledge inside me was never meant to dominate. It was meant to merge. Earth was not just a recipient. It was a participant. The base had been waiting, not for salvation, but synchronization. As the frequencies merged, the doctor fell to her knees, weeping. Not in fear. In awe. Behind me, systems shut down. Screens shattered from harmonic overload. The vault sealed itself. And the last thing I heard before my atoms scattered into signal was not a farewell. It was a beginning. One sentence, clear and final, in a voice that sounded both alien and human. Now you are not alone.